Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. It's great to see such a large number of participants already pouring in. Thank you for taking out the time to be with us today. Uh, in this or in today's session, we have structured the discussion around three key topics. First, we will take a moment to reflect on the key takeaways from 2024 and then focus on the major priorities for 2025. Then we will unpack some of the specific actions that GBS leaders must take in order to drive success in the upcoming year. And finally, we'll spend some time discussing some questions that we have from our audience today. We're excited to get started. Uh, Before we unpack some of the things that we are expecting in 2025, we also want to take a couple of minutes to understand what were some of the persistent themes for 2024, right? And this is based on our in-depth conversations with GBS leaders and industry participants. Uh, while you see many of these topics have been part of our ongoing discussions for some time, the items that you see on the screen, they have actually become even more profound in recent months. What's particularly interesting, what you see on the slide, is how interconnected many of these themes are now. Just picking on some items or observations, right? Yes, Gen AI still continues to be a dominant topic, but the discussion around it has actually evolved. Instead of having more broad speculative discussions, we are now sort of seeing a more pragmatic approach towards it. The questions are more around where exactly is Gen AI working? What are successful use cases that are going into production? What has been the impact that has been realized so far? Another interesting trend that we are noticing is the brand positioning for GBS organizations. There is an increasing focus on how GBS is perceived both internally and externally, and how this perception influences their role and the tone they take when they're engaging with stakeholders. So it's not no longer just about what GBS does, it's about how they're viewed and the impact this has on their overall strategy and relationships. With this, before we dive into the first message, we actually have a poll for our audience today. It's mostly around what do you expect some of the top priorities in 2025. Our audience has the flexibility to choose as many options as they can basis their internal priorities. And some of the initial responses that I see don't seem very surprising from what we have, from what we understand in the industry. And we are just going to take a couple of more seconds, maybe 10 more seconds before we close the poll and announce the results to the audience. And yes, it seems clear that cost optimization still is the more, I would say, the pressing item in the agenda and the top priorities for GBS leaders, followed closely by investing in technology initiatives, and then building follows. But let us get started with how does this align with the findings that we have put together today, right? So time to get the cat out of the bag and share our first key insight. So time and again, we have been asked this overarching industry question: what's the growth sentiment for 2025, right? And the way we view it is that the outlook for business services is leaning towards optimism, particularly within enterprise segment. And yes, we'll dive deeper into these trends, some of the key factors that are engaging. But two noteworthy trends that we have observed is, on one hand, we have in-house GBS organizations that will continue their growth trajectory. We are likely going to see more setups, existing adopters of the model expanding their operations. And on the other side, we will have the outsourcing landscape, which has, again, gone through a tough times through these uncertain macroeconomic scenarios and spending constraints. But we are seeing signs of revival in growth, right? What you see on this particular slide is mostly the key factors that will shape growth. Talking about cost containment, right, which came out as the topmost priority in the poll, it's going to be crucial. It will be the topmost priority. You can still expect cautious approach towards spending areas while enterprises maintain financial discipline. Digital transformation. I think this will continue to be have the same emphasis, or actually more accelerated transformation can be expected. What that means is you're going to have more optimization of processes, re-engineering processes to increase productivity while delivering meaningful enhancements. And finally, and more importantly, is how do you start driving greater value while balancing the cost containment and digital transformation? What that means is in your solutions, in your servicings, how can you help enterprise capture more value, which has a direct impact on revenue? Are there new ways through which you can drive innovation at scale for enterprises, which has a direct impact on their top line? Can you build capabilities that do not exist anywhere in the enterprise, right? Because this becomes very important, right? And if you were to look at some of these investments that enterprises uh, that enterprises seem to have, right? it it's very clear that compared to the last year, we are expecting the average budget at the industry level to increase by 7.2%. What's particularly encouraging, however, is that 50% of the enterprise buyer segment has shown a greater willingness to spend. Even more, it's exciting. If you look at the box in the chart, you will see about 20% of those enterprises are signaling a more than 15% increase in their budget allocation for global services. So this definitely represents a threefold increase in percentage points compared to last year. Hence, the signs of rebound seem to be clear. Uh, Before we move on to the next message, right, Anish, I know we have touched upon the exciting sentiment of the in-house GBS model, right? Could you share more light on where do we see the growth to come from?
Sure. Thanks, Nikhil. Greetings to all our audience. So one of the interesting things which you touched upon is the spending, right? The spending on the global services space. Now, as we track the market, we believe that a significant portion of this would go to the GBS or the GCC segment, the shared services segment. So the momentum will certainly continue to scale the in-house capabilities. Not just capabilities, but also the spend portion will be on the transformation side of things. So if you move next, I just want to resound the um, messages which you mentioned on the global services rebound, right? So on the next slide, you'd notice that on the GBS, some of the statistics tell us that GBS is for all. Now, what does that mean, right? Among the new center setups which keeps happening over the year, now we track about 8,000 plus global services centers. Each year, about 300 to 400 new setups keeps on happening. Out of that, almost more than 50% of the setups are done by first time adopters of the GBS model, which means that it sounds the model is showcasing its potential. More and more enterprises want to try out this model and they trust the model, right? If you can stay on the same slide, another statistic which we have is it also talks about that more than 25 to 30% are from mid to small size enterprise, which means that not just large enterprises, but the smaller enterprises are also showcasing signs of opening a GBS or a GCC center. This is also led by greater globalization, which means that there is an expansion of the model across the globe. New locations keeps on adding, whether it's across APAC, Eastern Europe, or Latin America. Within APAC or other regions as well, we also keep on hearing about expansion in tier two cities, which is much real and across the board, right? So BFSI, manufacturing, IT, healthcare, or pharma, they are globalizing in true sense and also expanding to add some tier two cities in their portfolio. One another factor which we keep on hearing is, or the challenge which we keep on hearing is the geopolitical challenge, but I believe that has had limited impact on the model. Whether we call about Ukraine-Russia war, now it's happening since 3 years. Has it limited the growth in the Eastern European region? No, it hasn't. Companies are still expanding in that region, right? And then there are some more drivers which are propelling the GBS momentum, and we'll talk in a while. But some of them are leaning towards IT ops integration and greater value addition being done by the GBS. Okay, so these are certain factors or drivers which reinforces our trust in the model. Now, on the next slide, you'll see some more statistics, which I was talking about, right? In last 24 months, 25 to 30% of the setups are done by the mid-sized enterprises. We are moving beyond just tier one cities to expanding tier two, tier three cities as well. Interesting point here to highlight is 40 to 50% of the mid-sized enterprises are opening not a very large center, but they're starting with nano or micro-sized centers, which means that it's less than even 100 or 200 FTs. What does that tell us, right? That tells that, hey, while GBS ideal situation is to deliver or have multifunction support, but then to start off with, it certainly does not need to have the full bouquet of services, but you can still start with some set of services, but do a great job by adding value for the enterprise. And that's what it shows, right? 50% of the mid-sized enterprises which opened the GBS are delivering or doing high value add services, which means they in some fashion are doing strategic work, some complex judgment intensive activity across the board, whether it's within finance, procurement, supply chain, HR, or other shared services areas, right? But you need to just deliver, keep on delivering the impact to showcase the potential to your enterprises and grow further. So these are certain factors which reinforces the success of the GBS model. Now, where is this growth coming from, right? If you move to the next slide, we have highlighted certain set of locations which are showcasing momentum in terms of GBS setup. Now, India is certainly one of the leading locations, followed by Central Eastern Europe. Certain locations in Southeast Asia is certainly coming up as spokes to India for multiple organization. And then there is select leverage for Latin America and Middle Eastern locations as well, which again reinforces our point on the globalization model. There are companies which want to have a follow the sun delivery model, and hence need for certain spokes in multiple locations depending on the market which they want to serve. But again, net the model adoption is increasing. It's globalized. There are new locations, including tier two cities, which are popping up. Now, when we move to the next theme, right? We spoke about the growth, we spoke about the locations. Now, what is leading to this? Why the trust in the model, right? There are certain areas which the GBS organizations or the shared services are focusing, and certainly that is contributing to seamless alignment with the business priorities, and that's where the enterprises are witnessing value. If you see what are the impact levers which are there, you'll see that technology modernization, process optimization, data insights, which were also which came in the poll which we did at the start of the webinar, showcases top three levers. But in the fourth one, which to me is kind of an enabler for the first three, is the increased IT ops integration. Because however you change your process workflow, you would be only able to reach a certain level of efficiency or efficacy within the process. Until unless you digitally enable your processes, you won't be able to unlock the ceiling of the extra productivity or the benefits which you want to achieve. And that is where the IT ops integration becomes important. And you see the jump which is there from 2024, where it was back eighth in the priority order. Now it is in top five. If you move to the next slide, basically it talks about GBS are certainly integrating technology and operations to enhance efficiency, agility, and alignment with business priorities. Now the shift is driven by several factors, right? There is external factor and then there is internal factor. The external factor is certainly the agility and the scalability. So the use of solutions like intelligent automation, data-driven decisions allow you to make quick adjustments to the market conditions and then react according to the enterprise expectation, right? So that is one of the lever which is there. The second lever is customer-centric approach, or basically the factor which drives this, right? Technology is enabling GBS to enhance user experience. Now, user experience is both internal, which is your employees, which is a key part of services industry, and then externally the customers and the partners which you have by providing self-service solutions, real-time insights, and then predictive prescriptive analytics with AI kicking in, right? Again, the internal factor is also digital transformation, the way you deliver services. So the adoption of AI automation across the operations which the GBS delivers helps them streamline workflows, reduce cost, and improve service delivery. So things like data-driven procurement, AI-powered customer service, intelligent automation in finance, right? These are some use cases across the board, which are certainly showcasing the potential which the GBS organizations have by integrating IT and operations together. Uh, at the end of the day, I mean, GBS organizations know the process well, and if they are able to integrate technology, they would be the ones who can really deliver high value for the enterprise. Right? Now, technology plays a key role, and technology keeps on evolving. Right? Let's say from simple coding to low code and no code, automation to AI, now Gen AI. The landscape keeps on changing, and so our ways of working. Mohini, on that note, I know you have been doing some research on the AI space. Do you want to share how that is transforming the industry and particularly the operation side of the industry as well?
Sure, Anish. So, Gen AI is revolutionizing not just the entire industry, but inclusive of the GBS centers. The industry is automating repetitive tasks, enhancing decision making, bettering the productivity. We all realize that AI has been the center of conversations for the last 2 years, as Nikhil mentioned at the start. Also, it's been praised for its potential, explored through a lot of pilots, and it has been debated endlessly. Yet, despite all the excitement, the large scale adoption has remained pretty much a challenge. We've seen a surge in investments. Enterprises, GBS units are experimenting. They are running proof of concepts. They are launching pilot projects. But the reality is slightly different. We did a study by the end of 2024, and in that study, we realized that in the first year alone, nearly 90% of these initiatives didn't fly through. Uh, the second year did see some improvement, but the failure rate was still very high. Around 70% of the projects never really reached the production. Now, why is that? Why, despite the intent and the investment, are so many organizations struggling to scale their Gen AI ops? One of the biggest hurdles, as per the same study, emerged as cost. So the idea is Gen AI isn't just about one another software upgrade. Most of the organizations pretty much underestimated the financial commitment involved, not just for building those AI models, but even for maintaining, fine tuning, and integrating them into the business workflows. Then there's the problem of building the technology infrastructure around AI. These Gen AI models are only good as far as the data is good because they are trained on that data. And the reality is that most of the organizations are working on fragmented, unstructured data, which kind of brings that reliability of those insights into the question. Um, Now, talent that has been one of the another major challenge. The speed at which Gen AI evolved clearly outstripped the availability of the skilled professionals. There simply aren't enough experts who can fine tune these large models or integrate them into the business processes, but even foresee and manage those risks related to the AI. And finally, last but not the least, a lot of pilots did stall because there was lack of clear success matrix. Everyone jumped into the AI experimentation phase without really defining what success meant to them. If we move on to the next slide, we do realize that yes, there were hurdles. Despite all those challenges, enterprises and GBS organizations are optimistic this year. Gen AI has emerged as one of the top priorities for technology investments for these organizations. Only change, they've become far more pragmatic. And how are they planning to do it? Is engage more with suppliers, benefit from their capabilities, and also benefit from the control over balance sheet. And of course, beyond just external hiring, investing in talent transformation has also emerged as a key. upskilling your existing talent with the Gen AI capabilities to derive those better outcomes has been important, and that is being taken into consideration by these organizations. So now we've talked about how cost is one of the biggest reasons why AI POCs didn't fly through in 2024 and 2023. That's because it's always been cost. Cost has always been at the table stakes for organizations. If we move on to the next slide, as per the same study that we conducted, 50% of the organizations believe that cost and margin pressures will be at the top of their minds in 2025. Yeah, the next slide. Because for every company, every function, every transformation initiative, managing costs is the foundation. And given the macroeconomic environment, there's market volatility, there are inflationary pressures, the customer expectations are ever evolving, and that definitely puts costs at the center stage. But here's where we see the shift is happening. It's no longer just about cost cutting, it's about cost optimization. That is, organizations are now finding ways to balance efficiency with the long term growth. So you can see 63% of the organizations, enterprises say that they will prioritize cost saving measures. And as we've seen initially in the poll itself, cost optimization is going to be the priority for majority of the participants. So 63% of these enterprises, they are saying that the cost optimization will be their priority over value creation in the coming years. Now, while that might seem like a trade off, the reality is that businesses have started realizing they now know that they can't drive growth without having a sustainable cost structure. So, how are they going to do it? One is process optimization and operational efficiency. Over 50% of the leaders believe that refining internal operations is going to be the key, is going to be the most impactful way to meet their business objectives. From streamlining workflows to reducing redundancies, these efficiency gains will definitely have a significant impact on their bottom line. Another one is the location strategies. That means the leaders will naturally lean on towards higher use of offshore, nearshore locations, especially those which have better cost arbitrage opportunities. Third is, if we move on to the next slide, a more balanced approach between cost and revenue. So while 61% of the enterprises do cite that cost optimization is a key priority, 66% also say that the need for the accelerated revenue growth is also important. That means investments aren't being eliminated, they are just becoming more targeted. So enterprises are focusing on areas that drive both efficiency and innovation, whether it's AI adoption, whether it's talent transformation or customer experience enhancements. The reality is the same. Cost pressures will never go away. But the way organizations now approach cost has to evolve, and it is now evolving. The winners will be those who don't just cut the costs, but rather those who are optimizing them in a way that fuels more resiliency, more scalability, and long-term business outcomes, long-term business success into the system.
Thank you, Moini. So we are at 27-minute mark, and before we unpack uh, another insight for you, we actually are quite excited to extend a special offer to our enterprise and GBS leaders. So what we have on offer is a complimentary session, a one-on-one session with our SMEs. So this session is mostly on an opportunity for you to dive deeper into the overall landscape, discuss your key priorities for 2025, and gain some insights into the journeys that GBS organizations take to reach their desired outcomes. Uh, what you can also expect is, again, we'll be happy to schedule a call with you to explore these topics more in detail. Just to take advantage of this offer, simply reach out to the SMEs listed on this page. We would strongly recommend that you make the most of this opportunity to gain valuable insights and drive forward with your GBS strategy. Uh, with this, coming back to the key messages, right? Uh, Anish, I would like to bring you in. And one of the key pressing themes that is coming up is how do we see the in-house GBS organizations collaborate with service providers, right? In what areas? Is there actually a scope for it? So happy to know your insights.
Yeah, thanks, Nikhil. I guess this question is pertinent for both sides of the house, right? It's pertinent for not just service providers, but also GCCs or GBS organizations, because at the end of the day, um, we are looking at a complete ecosystem. We are uh, looking at how can different organizations collaborate to achieve the best in class outcome, right? And enterprises would be more than willing to think on those lines rather than thinking about one entity versus another. Now, if you move to the next slide, the thing which I want to point out here is as a GBS model matures, enterprises and GBS organizations are increasingly partnering with service provider to accelerate growth, enhance capabilities, and drive transformation. So, a decade back, people might think, or even slightly earlier, GBS and service providers were in a compete phase, right? Now, enterprises would also think as one versus another. What is the best way of delivering services? GBS and service providers would always be on the lookout for more scope with enterprises, but on a standalone basis, right? They would compete and showcase that hey, one is better than another in terms of cost reduction or process streamlining, and so on and so forth. As the industry matured, we started seeing some collaboration happening. Now, collaboration was in terms of how can service providers help GCCs or GBS organizations deliver services better? Now, some of that was still oriented towards cost reduction, where service providers were offering a lot of headcount for the service for the GCCs, while GCCs keeping in the domain and the strategic work, right? Why what we see the industry moving towards is orchestration, and that is where we believe that the true essence of the hybrid model comes into picture, wherein a GBS organization can orchestrate the relationship on behalf of the enterprise because they are the ones who are closer to the customer on behalf of the enterprise. They are the one who know the domain know-how, while the service provider can provide the best in class or scale service delivery. They can provide the SLAs KPIs which are required to a particular optimum level. And while GBS organizations can focus on driving the strategy. So this is a chart which we are showing, right? On the x-axis, we already talked about the three phases as the GBS organization mature: compete, collaborate, orchestrate. Given the strategic focus, which is cost to talent and capability, and now more towards business context and operations, right? So this is how we see the industry moving, and this more so is gaining momentum because at the end of the day, GBS wants to move from a just from a cost saving functions to a value creation hub. That is where the orchestration comes into picture. Service providers can certainly bring in their expertise in terms of technology leverage, while GBS organizations can contextualize that in the enterprise context and know the domain know-how, where and how it needs to be implemented within the process. Digital transformation is again one of the big themes which is across both the entities, and they want to work towards it in an accelerated fashion. Service providers also offer certain flexibility, likes of pay you pay you as you go model, right? Which is enabling enterprises to create the overall outsourcing operations, which include GBS and in-house, without being a capex heavy investment. So they can focus on their growth across the globe while the service providers take care of some of the heavy upfront investment which they are anyways doing for a lot of enterprises, and that can be optimized or that can be used for their clientele as well. So I believe the industry is in a very exciting time wherein the collaborate phase is happening. There are some of the exciting JVs also being announced by some of our GBS or enterprises clients in association with service providers, which again showcases the higher level of collaboration which is happening. Now, the point which you are making here is the GBS leaders need to think how can they orchestrate this relationship so that they can elevate the value which is getting delivered from the GBS. On the next slide, we have similarly highlighted some of the statistics. So this is based on the survey which we do every year, mapping the next, which is key priorities for GBS organizations and enterprises. And that also showcases that GBS partnerships with service providers are further strengthening. And the areas where it's strengthening is both one, the digital transformation side, which is the highest rated, and then the cost containment levers, which are either managed services, support in center setups by providing by getting to a BOT kind of a model or assisted BOT kind of a model, and then outsourcing of certain services which enterprises feel that the service providers can do better because those are more transactional in nature, which a service provider already has a good setup to deliver, while the GBS can focus more on strategic work, right? So it's a combination which I believe will add to the value creation for the enterprise. With that, we move to the next segment, which is again on value. We talked about how can GBS organizations drive higher order value and strengthen their brand entity. With that, if you move to the next slide, I just wanted to highlight or set the context first. So we spoke about a lot of changing dynamics and landscape for GBS organizations. Right now, at the core of it, the expectation itself is changing. So the enterprise now does not look at a GBS organization just from a capacity perspective, but the expectation more is how can you build capability? Now, capability can be either innovation, either technology, either services, right? So how can you deliver more capability within the enterprise, within the GCC organization? The focus is changing from cost arbitrage to value first. Now, today, it's not just reducing cost, but how do you add value driven function to support business growth, which means added layer of maybe analytics to drive certain insights for the business and not just delivering operations, right? Uh, Building not just process expertise, but adding business context to it so that that process makes sense for the business, right? It's just not just delivering on SLAs which are there, but defining some of the success metrics which are tied to the enterprise vision, right? And that is where the one entity goal comes into picture. So GBS is not um, just operating at an arm's length distance, but it's operating as one single entity in together with the enterprise, right? Now, the expectations from the leadership is also changing. It's not just that you are there to deliver or execute certain processes, but it's now a partner-driven collaboration which is there between the GBS leaders and the enterprise leaders, and also the service providers or the business partners you have. So these are certain DNA changes or the expectation changes which are happening, which are leading to some of the changes within the GBS landscape as well. And that is where in the next slide, you'll see that the way we represent GBS displays different kind of persona at different point in time. Um, Again, it's no longer just a support function, adding cost reductions to the delivery, but it's an integral part for the enterprise growth. It's integral part for the innovation. It's integral to digital transformation strategy which the enterprise wants to follow, right? So the shift is towards capability building, business aligned metrics, technology driven efficiency, which is what will differentiate integrator, which is the state 5 GCC, from a arbitrager, which is more of a just a cost reduction entity, and that's where the value add comes into picture as well, right? So we have actually a maturity diagnostic framework around this, wherein we assess our clients on the metric to show on the framework to show where they currently lie and what's the path ahead, right? But this is a good visualization in order to see on what grounds you are delivering onto your expectations from the enterprise and where the North Star currently lies. Lastly, I would like to introduce the GBS value wheel in this section. We wanted to do this since long, right? Because during all our conversations with multiple GBS leader, we observed that the traditional levers of value, such as cost and productivity, although applicable, do not do justice to capture the value which the GBS is delivering for the enterprise, right? The way to look at this framework is the inner circle is the characteristic of the GBS organization. Now, whether the GBS has that characteristic or not, is it needs to be developed or it's already there. It needs to be sent in. That needs to be figured out. The outer circle is more of vectors associated to those characteristics, which then drives value. For example, if I take the integrated talent management as a characteristic within the GBS organization, it enables greater number of career pathing because you have your centers integrated, you have your functions integrated, and hence the career pathing for a particular resource within a GBS can be multifold, which particularly leads to a value driver, which is better employee experience. And hence, if the employees are better engaged, they are happy, the customer experience also becomes better, which in this case is the enterprise or the end customer, right? Similarly, end-to-end scope enables connected customer experience because now you're not just looking at one part of the value chain, for example, not just one part of the finance or not just finance, but end-to-end integrating the feedback loop from finance to procurement to supply chain and so on and so forth, which is creating a connected customer experience, which is more consistent, and business is also happy, and you're also delivering on multiple efficiency and efficacy metrics. So there are multiple characteristics. I'm not going into each detail, but then again, this is where the complementary offer comes into picture. If our audience wants to connect on this topic as well, we are happy to walk them through on what we consider as value levers, how can you achieve that, and so on and so forth, right? But there are multiple characteristics which the GBS organization seeks to display in order to develop certain new value levers which can create better value for the organization deriving from this model. With this, Nikhil, I would like to hand it over back to you, probably to take us through the next section.
Thank you, Anish. This brings us to the second key topic that we have for our audience. Uh, Now, definitely, there are a number of actions that GBS leaders can prioritize and start planning for it as as they move deeper into 2025, right? And what you see on the slides are some of the call to actions, right? Uh, Let me start off with the first one. I think it's imperative for GBS leaders to double down, or I mean, dial up their overall branding efforts. They need to be very clear in what is their identity and what is the role that they have in the overall scheme of things. This will also have an impact on their external and internal positioning. Uh, Recognize that the talent war still exists for specialized skills. So it also becomes important from building and strengthening your EVP in the market. Second, cost containment. We spoke a lot about it, but cost containment only through the means of arbitrage is a given and will not be a differentiator. GBS leaders actually need to be moving beyond the operational metrics and start tracking business metrics and translate that in a manner that signify the true value GBS organizations create. We've often seen that doesn't get highlighted. So there is naturally a need to be more adept in some value quantification frameworks and some strong storytelling. Third, what Anish had actually covered, it's no longer a turf war between in-house GBS organizations and service providers. You must leverage providers and specialists where you can augment your business context and stakeholder experience management with their specialized capabilities, right? Whether that could be an AI transformation, solution development, anything that offers any business agility or operational excellence or customer centricity, right? Fourth, uh, now AI is embedded in products, services, and it will naturally influence larger aspects of business. GBS leaders need to be very clear in recognizing areas where AI is working and what impact is getting created. The scope for experimentation in a cost containment environment will be very limited. So, need to exercise a very pragmatic approach and identify areas where meaningful outcomes have already been achieved by the industry. And last, definitely there is an optimism that's growing in the industry. And there is definitely a scope to even relook at leverage global services more deeply. This may also mean that you may need to rebalance your sourcing and shoring footprint as you try to untap a lot more potential. So those are some of the key takeaways that we have for our audience. Now, before we get to the Q&A, uh, and then we want to just spend a couple of minutes talking about some of the important announcements that we have for our audience here, right? First of all, again, Everest Group is all about bringing more value to enterprise and connecting leaders with our analysts. Uh, Everest Group Engage, which we experimented last year in November 2024. Uh, Based on the success, we are thrilled to announce that the second edition is happening in London. As a matter of fact, we have around 150 attendees, 20 plus Everest Group analysts, many case study sessions already been planned for. Uh, yes, it's happening in London, and I think it's a great chance for enterprise and GBS leaders from the region to come together and share insights. A lot of our members have complimentary access to the event, so if you're a member, be sure to reach out and ask for more information. The details are already shared on the chat. The second key update that I also wanted to share with the group is the NASSCOM GCC Awards 2025. So the awards are back this year, and Everest Group is again proud to be partnering with NASSCOM for the third consecutive time on this initiative. The nominations are already open. We have 4 award categories, uh, which you can see on this slide, focusing on innovation, new capability specialization, building talent for future, value adds through ecosystem collaboration, right? If you need more details, the link is already provided in the chat, but you can reach out to the IDs highlighted on the slide for any inquiries around the award. The winners will be announced on 22nd of April at Hyderabad International Convention Center, HICC. With this, we would like to open this discussion for Q&A. Uh, and I can see a few questions already coming in. Uh, the first question that we see is uh, Trump administration, and that's an interesting question. So, Mohini, do you want to take up the question? And for our audience, let me just read that out. What is the sentiment regarding captive onshore, offshore following Donald Trump's appointment? Mohini, can you? I think you're on mute.
Um, okay. I hope I'm unmuted now. So thanks for that, Nikhil. Um, yeah, I'll take up that question. We've been reading through it. We've been seeing, analyzing what the sentiment is. And sentiment around the GBS operations is expected to be influenced by some of the policy decisions related to, tariffs, taxation, and more broadly, the protectionist measures. Uh, in the more near term, any trade restriction or policy shifts favoring domestic job creations could create uncertainties, and enterprises may face increased scrutiny over offshoring decisions. But in the longer term, businesses are likely to adapt. We can expect a shift towards a more balanced global delivery model with organizations optimizing costs through a mix of onshore, nearshore, offshore captives, but also exploring other avenues like we talked about automation, digital transformation within the GBS centers itself to mitigate those labor cost pressures and ultimately relieving that additional stress. So, yeah, in the short term, yes, we can expect some impact, but in the longer term, we believe that that stress will stabilize.
Thank you, Mohini. We have another question, which is what would be more in demand, in housing or outsourcing? I can take that up. I think the short answer is that the whole global services pie is going to increase, and we are going to see the in-house model continue the growth that it has maintained over the past 1 or 2 years, right? On the other side, we will see outsourcing landscape to revive, particularly after a very stressful 2023, 2024, as a matter of fact. So yes, both models will grow as we see the entire services landscape uh, rebound. We have another question, which is, what are the challenges for transforming GCC in 2025? Anish, do you want to take that up?
Yeah, I can take that up, Nikhil. So, see, one of the biggest challenge for GCCs would be to have that fine balance between managing the cost pressure and still delivering onto the transformation initiative which is there. Now that's one. The second important one, and it actually would help the first one, is how do you create that smooth relationship between yourself and your business leaders, which means that the alignment to anything what you do should be directly with the vision of the enterprise, which will give you a greater mandate to deliver on the expectations which the enterprise have and what the GBS leaders want to do in terms of their priorities and their visions, right? So I believe these are two things which would be the biggest hurdles to balance, and then certainly showcasing the ROI, the value, and anything which you are doing. So showcasing value around that would be important. So again, goes back to the value wheel and the framework would be important. So articulating the value, measuring those values, and then taking back to the business would be the key goal here.
Got it. Uh, we see another question, which is talks about the difference in GIC versus GCC, and is there a priority of one model over the other in 2025? Now, typically, the way we see the whole in-house model, we see GICs and GCCs being interchangeably used. But yes, if you were to go a bit deeper into the definitions, naturally the GCCs is host a number of capabilities in the locations that they are present in, whereas a global in-house centers may not necessarily have all of them, right? But then again, at times it's also just a local nuance wherein an in-house model may necessarily be a GIC, but still very much have showcasing characteristics of a GCC as well. So that's that. I think there was also another question around, you mentioned Gen AI in your presentation. Did you mean IA plus Gen AI or only Gen AI? Mohini, do you want to take that up? You're on mute. Okay. Now I think I'll take that up. I see when the Gen AI, what we had presented on Gen AI, it was actually generative artificial intelligence. So that was the focus area. Uh, there are some more questions that I think Anish has already answered on the chat, but some of the specific capabilities being located in Costa Rica. Yes, we see heavy BPO work. We also see a lot of voice-based work being done out of Costa Rica, good English-speaking talent. So that's that. I think with this, we have addressed most of the questions that we see. In case if there are any specific question that you may want us to address, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll be happy to take those questions offline. But thank you so much for taking out the time and sharing your perspectives, your questions. I hope you found value in this discussion.